It's great to be with you. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you. Shame it's not in church, but that's the situation we are in at the moment. Feels like it's been a while since we've been together, and even now we're not properly together. But hopefully, in the next few minutes, I can share a few thoughts with you on today's Bible verse. So, our New Testament Bible verse today, I think, is essentially about a choice. Are you a sheep or are you a goat? Are you all about self or are you all about service? It's all about a choice, and that's your choice today. I found the last few months really interesting. I don't know about you, but when the first lockdown started, and people started to hear that we might be in a lockdown situation, two things happened. There were two groups of people. The first group of people started stockpiling. There were fights in supermarkets. I know at the cash and carry, not far from where I live, there were long queues and people getting very aggressive with each other, stockpiling packets of pasta, toilet rolls, baby milk when they hadn't got babies. It was all very, very strange. And then there were another group of people, those who thought of others, those who reached out a hand of service, a hand of love to other people, offering to shop for one another for those who couldn't get out. I know my neighbours and us and my in-laws all shared our shopping trips. So if we were going shopping, we would share with anybody else. Is there anything else you needed? Can we go and get that for you? Can you get that for us? All to keep each other safe. So people were shopping for each other. People were cooking meals for those who were shielding or isolating, or just life was difficult. People were donating and volunteering for food banks and for other essential works. I know for a fact that Food Bank in Coventry has been busier than ever, but also they've had more food than ever to match the need. Our key workers, as we've talked about and clapped and supported, they've kept us going, physically, practically, medically. But aren't we all called to be key workers? Aren't we all called to be servants? Aren't we all called to pick up our cross and follow him? So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about being a servant. Are we a sheep or are we a goat? So how do you feel about being a servant? When somebody uses that phrase, do you think Joshua or Jonah? Or do you think about the cast of Downton Abbey? Which one is it? Does the word historically make you think of oppression or injustice? Are we called to be servants to the world? To each other or to God? Does being a servant mean that we're always busy? Or is it simply a case of being ready in case we're called? I believe this talk and hope this talk will look at whether we are sheep or goats naturally, whether we are self-centred or whether we're servant-hearted. And it's not an easy conversation to have. Many of us think, oh, I'm servant-hearted, but actually when you look deep inside yourself, maybe we're more self-centred than we want to admit. So I want to look at that today, and also want to look at it in the context of what we're going through right now, a global pandemic, a time when and maybe our real self comes out a little bit. There'll be Bible verses throughout. I will give you each one and I will read them through. Hope maybe you can go back and look at them at a later date. There's going to be a printed version of this, so if you want to go back and look at those Bible verses later, you can. So we're going to start with Bible verse. Romans 6:17 to 18 says this: But thanks be to God that though you used to be slaves to sin, you wholeheartedly obeyed the form of teaching to which you were entrusted. You have been set free from sin and have become a slave to righteousness. So we can be a slave to something bad, but we can also be a slave to something good. And there are 4 points I want to make today. I want to look at, are we called to serve God and those around us? If we are, how? What stops us? And finally, what does that mean today in the context of the pandemic? So what does the Bible say? Always a good place to start. Well, I know that Hebrews 9:14 says that we may serve the living God. Or if you look at the Message version, the first one was the NIV. If you look out for the Message version, it says, so that we can live all out for God. I like that. Hebrews 12:28 says, therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken. Let us be thankful and so worship God acceptably with reverence and awe. So God gives us so much, and in response to that, we might want to respond in service. Romans 12:1. Therefore I urge you, brothers, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. It's an interesting one, isn't it? A living sacrifice. We don't have to be called to die for Jesus in the way that Jesus died on the cross. We're called to be a living sacrifice, to offer our sacrifice through what we do while we're alive. So do we have our own calling? Do we have our own ministry? We see so many people sometimes brought to the front of church and we pray for their ministry, but I believe each one of us has our own ministry that we're called by God to do. It says in Colossians 4:17, see to it that you complete the work you have received in the Lord. So that would suggest that for each one of us, God has a plan, that it is right that we listen to him in order that we can honour that calling that he's put on our lives. Through serving him, his perfect plan for us will be revealed. And that should be an honour, shouldn't it? To serve the living God, to be a living sacrifice. Throughout the Bible, it suggests that service is an honour. In Deuteronomy 9:27, it says, remember your servants, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Looking back to those pillars of the Bible, to what they did in service to God. 1 Kings 8:53 says, for you singled them out from all the nations of the world to be your own inheritance, just as you declared through your servant Moses when you, O sovereign Lord, brought the fathers out of Egypt. Another pillar of the Bible. And it can go on, and there are so many different stories of those names we know, those names we learn in Sunday school and in home groups and throughout the Bible, and we know so well. They're all named as servants. So it's a good thing to be. We may sometimes, because of our history, think of servant as a lowly position. But actually God holds that position in high esteem. To him, it's the ultimate thing we can do, is to be a servant for him to others. And we know that most of the New Testament writers recognise that there's importance in simplicity, in being a servant. If you look at the beginning of James or the beginning of Philippians or Revelation, most of the writers introduce themselves as the servant of God, a servant of God. That's how they wanted to be recognised. That's how they wanted to be remembered. And so the question today for us is how do we want to be remembered? What do we want to for people to say about us? Is it for being the one who had enough toilet paper when everyone else ran out? Or is it the one who served others through the love of God? At the end of the day, we only need to listen to Jesus for the answer. Jesus knows what we are called to do. This is John 13:12-17, a really well-known passage in the Bible. You'll recognise it straight away. When he had finished washing their feet, he put on his clothes and returned to his place. Do you understand what I have done for you? He asked them. You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you an example, that you should do as I have done for you. I tell you the truth, no servant's greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you'll be blessed if you do them. And that's the key part of that sentence, isn't it? You'll be blessed if you do them. It's not in the knowing, it's actually in the doing. And I know for myself, I want to be remembered for my service, for what I did, for those I helped, for those I loved and blessed, not for who I was, but for what I did for others. I think service is more about your heart than your hands. Sometimes service is about being willing to do something, not always rushing in and doing everything. I think service is more about stillness than busyness. The famous psalm, "Be still and know that I am God." Because by being still and listening to God, we will hear what God's call is for us and what he wants us to do and how he wants us to serve. And I think service is more about listening than it is about talking. But because by being still and hearing God's voice and being willing to do what he calls us to do, then we can truly serve. I believe God wants us to serve him, but only as a greater part of the plan he has for us. A few nights ago, I was listening to a well-known Bible teacher on TV with my wife, and he told a story about as a young married guy with a small child, he was called to movement ministry. He was in a role where he was starting to develop his role, and he was being offered positions of bigger churches and more more opportunity. And he felt God tell him in a moment of stillness, in a moment of quiet, that he should quit the job he was doing and take a job that was worth $23,000 a year. That was going to be really tough for his wife and for his child. He had to turn down a job that was worth $79,000 because he felt it was the thing that he had to do. He felt it was the thing that God was saying to him, "This is how I want you to serve me right now." And he took the job for $23,000, and he said it was probably one of the best and most fruitful ministries of his whole life. And now he was in a position where he was in a much bigger position, and it was amazing. But he still looked back with fondness at that opportunity to serve people in a place where God was calling him. And that takes us on to, I believe, three things that we need to be aware of in our service, in our love of others. The first thing we need to do is be obedient. We need absolute obedience in following God in where he sends us. If we look at the story of Joshua, and we haven't got time to read all this now, but the story of Joshua and the crazy things that God asked him to do. Cross the Jordan. Not just you, but everyone with you. March around the walls for 7 days. Don't worry about what people say about you or they laugh. Just keep going for 7 days. No, by the way, on the seventh day, 7 times. Joshua did as he was told. Joshua was obedient in his service, even in the face of embarrassment. Go and read Joshua 1:6-9 if you get time. If we are embarrassed, unsure, scared with what God asks us to do, we need to be strong and courageous, as it says in Joshua. We need to reach out and step out for Jesus, because then in our service for him, he'll be with us. So we need to be obedient. We also need to be humble. By humbling ourselves, obedience becomes easier. If it's not about us but about Jesus, then actually what he calls us to do will be less of a situation. Let me just find another couple of Bible verses for you. Ephesians 3:8. Although I am less than the least of all God's people, the grace was given to me to preach to the Gentiles the unsearchable riches of Christ. And 1 Timothy 1:15. Here is a trustworthy saying that deserves full acceptance. Christ Jesus come into the world to save sinners, of whom I am the worst. It's that idea of humility. That actually it's not about me, it's about God, it's about Jesus. And by us being obedient and humble, then we can really serve in a way that he wants us to. And the third point is to be absolutely loyal. We are called to be a loyal people. I don't know about you, but I'm a dog person. I've never got on with cats. If you've got cats, brilliant. I'm not a cat person. I really struggle with them. I think it comes down to loyalty. Dogs are always excited to see you. I know when I used to drive up the country to visit my parents, as I drove onto the drive, you could hear the dogs excited that I was there. They were always pleased. They were always loyal. They always wanted to be there with you and to please you and to just do stuff with you. My experience of cats is not the same. They will do whatever you ask them to do if it suits them. That's my experience. I could be wrong. If you've got lovely cats, Brilliant. But I believe we need to be more like dogs, that we need to be loyal. Do you remember back in the day when lots of supermarkets, loyalty cards became massive and they all wanted us to take loyalty cards because they wanted to be loyal to us, when actually in reality it was about us being loyal to them. We need to be loyal to God. Galatians 1:10 says, am I now trying to win the approval of men or of God? Or am I trying to please men? If I were still trying to please men, I would not be a servant of Christ. Our loyalty is to God. Our obedience is to God, and our humility is to God. And if we get all those right, if we get the levels right for those, then actually our service is a offering to God and a blessing to so many. But what stops us in our service? To quote the singer Meatloaf, I would do anything for love, but I won't do that. Some limit how they will serve. Some limit who they will serve. Some limit because of their attitudes or their backgrounds, their experiences. We limit those we feel worthy of our service. But it comes back down to those three words we've just heard: obedience, humility, and loyalty. So in closing, I just want to encourage you today that all of this can sound really complicated and a little bit too much in the middle of a pandemic and in the middle of something we don't understand and we don't know how we're going to get out of. But actually, I believe, irrespective of our age, our ability, our situation, our health, God still has a plan for us. God still has a calling on our lives. And out of that comes our service. It doesn't have to be to go and be a missionary somewhere in the middle of a pandemic. It could be actually phone a few friends and cheer them up. It could be, if you're going shopping, who else can you shop for? It could be pray for somebody. It could be anything, as long as it's what God calls you to do. I used to joke about when I joined Coventry City Mission that I believed God had called me to the Maldives. If you don't know the Maldives, it's sunny, it's remote, it's beautiful, it's idyllic. But he called me to Woodend instead. I'm obedient to God. I've gone to Woodend, even though I'd rather be in the Maldives. Whatever we're called to do, God will give us the strength. God will give us the ability and the skills to do it. And I just want to say that if our concern now is that we've got enough toilet roll for the next 3 months, when those around us haven't got enough for tomorrow, we've missed something. Don't be like those people. Don't be like the stockpilers. Don't be like the self-centered. We need to be servants of Christ. Because by being obedient to God's call on our lives, being humble in letting God set the agenda, and being loyal to his plan for us, we will truly serve him. And through that, we'll bless so many people, or maybe just one person, but it will make a difference for Christ. And I want to encourage you with that today. Thank you for listening. I hope it was a blessing to you, and I hope to see you in the flesh very, very soon.